Welcome to SmithWeekly Discussions, an occasional program for our readers and listeners of SmithWeekly Research. Please note this program is a private discussion, and everything contained herein is for entertainment and educational purposes only. With that, we hope you're in a comfortable position, along with your favorite beverage, to enjoy the discussion. We remind our audience to examine the show notes attached to each of our shows to better understand how our program functions. Before we get into our discussion, we want to say thanks for questions coming from our audience at SmithWeekly, including Paul M., Cindy W., and Dave V. Returning to the show today is Scott Trebilcock, President and CEO of Core Mining, a California-focused project developer and explorer advancing the Imperial Gold Project in Imperial County, California, and the Long Valley Gold Project in Mono County, California. The company also has exploration projects in British Columbia. The company is listed on the Toronto Venture Exchange under the symbol KORE, and also on the US OTC markets under the symbol KOREF. Scott, welcome back to the show.
Hey, thank you very much for having me.
Well, Scott, what are you up to? Where are you at? How are you surviving in COVID? Let's start with that.
Yeah, I'm up here in Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada. I think we've got a fairly strict local regime on COVID, so we've had a little bit of flexibility to try and keep life a little bit sane. There's a few people, we're still able to ski and do some outdoor activities to keep the sanity as the rain pours down here in Vancouver. I think in the business of core mining, COVID certainly has had impact on our business in California, where we've got 2 development projects, and it's been a tough year engaging with governments and agencies, although we have made some significant milestones. We certainly would love to be doing more stuff face-to-face and meeting with various people, but it is what it is, and we're making our way, and things are overall really good. Got to be happy to be in the precious metal business at this point in the economic cycle.
It's interesting the different responses of different countries. We've seen some places that are literally COVID-free, and other places that have kind of had a mixed bag of results, and some places that have just been a complete disaster. And while people definitely need to be prudent about being out there and taking precautions, we certainly don't require you to come on SmithWeekly Discussions and wear a mask while you're talking to me virtually. So that's a good thing.
Yes. Thank you for that.
Well, look, high-level views on the gold market here, Scott. And just let me couple that with something I just thought about. Folks have kind of criticized the price of gold for we have all these tailwinds, we have supply side issues, we have environmental issues with new deposits, new developments, we have old stuff that's coming off. And then we have all this money printing and these wild economic finance times where things like Bitcoin run, and people are moving out of the dollar, people are moving out of bank accounts and going into the markets. But yet gold is still really just a small rounding error in the big scheme. What's your thoughts on the gold market here, Scott? And do you think we're headed higher? And do you think this is really just the start and gold will start to perform?
Yeah, great debates. We've had a big discussion about this at our board strategy and planning sessions, over the last 3 months as we've gone through sort of planning for core going forward. And, obviously think about this every day and follow a lot of the pundits. I think internally, myself and the company strongly believe we're in the early innings of the gold market for the various reasons you summarized very well. The constant printing of money, I just can't imagine how much I'm in debt because of Mr. Trudeau's actions over and how my kids are ever going to pay that off without some form of inflationary, reduction of that debt or bankrupting the country. All those things just say that, things like alternate currencies, like Bitcoin, like gold, are going to attract investment. That's going to come in ebbs and flows. So but I think overall we're in a good long precious metal cycle here that's got to eventually match some of these economic policies macro we're seeing around the world. And I thought the COVID disruption would sort of blow us through $2,000 easily. So perhaps there's giving some people some pause, but alternative forms of investment will attract more and more capital here as that risk level continues to amp up. So I'm really excited to position myself in precious metals right now.
Yeah, I think that there's an effort to put the lid on things as much as possible here, but as we've seen, new administration coming into the U.S., that's still important to the global stage. And if they were able to ramp up the printing press and bring in a few extra printing presses, and as the Fed chairs have said, they just print it digitally. So if that's the case, then I think we're moving higher here, and there seems to be no restrictions on the amount of dilution that we're going to experience going forward here if you hold the paper currencies. Well, just get into core here. Spin-out transaction recently announced, Karus Gold, separating the California assets, obviously keeping core focused in California, but Karus is taking over for the British Columbian assets. But what's the thought process here, Scott, and what does the pro forma structure look like?
Karus is I think an exciting new company. In 2020, if we just sort of step back a bit, Core went into 2020 with a portfolio of assets. As you mentioned, we've in 2020 did PEAs in our 2 California projects, and we've really set up those California projects as a true development company. So Imperial is moving into mine permitting in 2021. Long Valley's a few years behind, and if you trace those forward to development, Core's got line of sight to almost 350,000 ounces per year of gold production as those 2 projects move into production. So, as Core grows in market cap, we expect will attract more and more institutional money, and people are going to be waiting and seeing their shares appreciate on de-risking of that development pipeline. And that means that, going out and raising capital to do early stage exploration in British Columbia might cause an eyebrow raise or two from those institutions that are thinking, well, why aren't you putting that money into your California projects? Does that mean they're no good? The short story is I've not seen a situation where gold companies or mining companies are well valued in multiple assets. The market seems to demand a very clear story, and that clear story for Core is the development pipeline of gold projects in California. In 2020, however, we kind of bucked the trend a bit and spent money across all 3 of the assets, British Columbia, Long Valley, and Imperial. And I think we had some great success up in British Columbia with the drill bit. We've got a whole bunch of holes pending. And we also went out and staked and did some land deals to secure 1,000 square kilometer land package around our projects we're drilling. And I think we were thinking, well, what do we do in 2021? And then along came a Cisco Development Corp. So we didn't really foresee it happening as it did, but I think it was fortuitous for us that a Cisco Royalty Corp spun out its Barkerville asset, a couple other assets into a separate company, a Cisco Development Corp led by Sean Ruzin. They raised $300 million, and they are going to be doing a ton of work in the north part of what's called the Caribou Gold District in BC, where their projects are. They got 5 million ounces, they got 12 drill rigs turning, they're a marketing machine, and Core is the 2nd largest landholder in the Caribou. And those assets are what's going in to create Karus. So I think Karus has a great opportunity to capitalize on that emergence of the Caribou Gold District in BC, the work we did in 2020, and be a great new company. So sort of all those factors wrapped together caused the board to make the decision to spin the BC assets to our shareholders. I think it is a really strong, independent, standalone and value creation story for a Core shareholder.
And do you guys plan to keep everything in-house, or is there an intent to possibly JV with nearby folks like you had mentioned? In addition to that, can you just talk about the pro forma structure real quick, Scott, as far as, what shares does Core retain and what shares went to shareholders, et cetera?
Correct. So we're doing a 100% spin out. Core is not going to retain any interest in Karus. They're different stories. It doesn't make a lot of sense for a California US gold development story in Core Mining to own an equity interest in Karus, a BC Explorer. To me, that's just an overhang, and it's the same shareholder base. So we said we're splitting it at 100% Karus. We'll start out with Core's shareholder base because obviously it's being dividended out from Core. It'll have its own independent CEO. It'll have an independent board. We're going to share CFO and some back office services to keep costs down, hopefully sit in the same office. but we truly want it to be an independent company. I think it's going to be a big winner. So Core will stay with, it's got 106 million shares out. We're kind of doing 2 for 1. So Karus will start with 53 million shares out with a plan to list that, get that company listed in Q2 this year.
And the JV bit there, just talk about your guys' thought process as far as, maybe farming some stuff out or just keeping all assets in house, including the good ones. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, we're going to keep everything 100%. We're in a, as we talked about the gold price, I think we're in the early stages of a gold market here. There is access to capital. And in those situations, you want to keep your company as clean as possible. And Core is kind of as clean as it gets. Management owns 38%. Eric Sprott owns 26%. The public float is reasonably liquid. So the share structure is really tight. And we own 100% of all of our assets. We don't have any, tough royalty or streaming deals on anything. So keeping the company nice and clean to allow that pure value creation from your work programs is how we want to keep the company.
No, that sounds great, and good on you for putting out all the shares to existing Core shareholders. I think that's really a smart move and really good. So back to Core, where are we on capital structure here in regards to shares out? Major shareholders, you just covered that, but go into a little more detail. Yeah. And then, of course, cash on hand at this point, Scott.
Yeah, exactly. So Core has 106 million shares out, basic, 117 fully diluted. We've got 7.7 million options to management and the board, and we've got 3.5 million warrants, but those warrants are all with Eric Sprott. So the only warrants outstanding on the company are 100% owned by Eric. Eric owns 26% of Core, so he's a control person. So he's effectively not liquid on any of that stuff. So I think that keeps Core's share structure really tight. So there's 38 million shares in the share structure that trade in the public float of the company. Those shares trade on the V in Canada and the OTCQX in the States. We've got today at December 1st, we had $6 million. We're probably at 5.5 today of cash in the company and about 160 million market cap. Got some burgeoning analyst coverage. So we've got some growing coverage from the Toronto Street as people see Core, starting to, get on the radar screen where it's meaningful, to the Toronto Street. And hopefully that continues in 2021 as we try and close the valuation gap with our peers, because we're still the smallest, cheapest US gold developer out there.
And talk about the warrants just briefly. I'm assuming all those are in the money that Eric has.
Yeah, correct. So just a little backstory on Eric. So he's come into Core on 3 separate investments. His first investment in, I think it was August of 2019, was no warrants, just straight equity. He came in again in, I think it was March of 2020, again, straight equity, no warrants. I thought that was a great win negotiating with him. And then he bought even more shares on the market, told us he wanted, to get to 25% of the company. So his final placement was in May of this year. And he'd been, at that point, he'd brought the stock, between his network and continuing to buy shares, we'd appreciated from, I think he started at 45 cents and we're at $1. So on the buck raising, so at $1 per share, he did get warrants at $1.50, and we're currently trading at $1.60. So his warrants are just slightly in the money right now.
Plus, he probably cleaned up during March COVID low 2020 at 12-13 cents. Looks like intraday. Very interesting stuff there, and good to see the share roster is very strong. Good, strong hands there, and certainly has paid off really well for the company.
Yeah, we've had some good liquidity. So you're right. We got to I think I bought some stock at $1.12 in October or November, so it was a little dip there to buy. But I think we've had good, strong. We rolled out a lot of the founding shareholders of the company. A lot of guys who are made money and come out. And that's good. We've got a good, strong shareholder base now that have bought shares between $1.12 and $1.80, and they want to see us take this company to $2 or $3, and that's what we got to do in 2021.
Right, and just talk maybe a little bit here with what's coming down the pipe for 2021, as far as your guys' G&A costs, overall cash burn here with where you are with cash on hand, how much runway do you see is left on the capital side before you guys are looking at the next capital raise, Scott?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, a lot of all exploration spend is discretionary. So when we think about budgeting and capital allocation inside core, the thing that we have to finance is our development team in California. So our Chief Operating Officer, Mark Leduc, has hired a full-time team that's based in an office in Imperial County, California. I think there's 4 professionals that are primarily environment and community relations and government relations. And the heavy weight of team is because we're moving a mine into permitting. It's most important that we engage with stakeholders and educate stakeholders about our projects. That's the focus of the team. And we have an array of consultants around them doing technical and engineering work as we work towards preparing a plan of operations for permitting the project. So financing that is use of capital number one. That burn rate, including our corporate overhead, I think it's about $8 million a year. So, the cash in the bank, if we just sort of went from today forward, we could keep funding our full permitting activities and corporate overhead into, Q3 of this year without much worry, but we couldn't explore. And we have an aspiration to do a lot of exploration inside core in 2021. We're permitting drilling at both Imperial and Long Valley. We'd expect to have a Long Valley permit in Q1 and an Imperial permit mid-year. So on the back of getting those permitting, I think that's a good reason to raise capital, because core's, we've not taken the strategy like some of our peer companies of raising capital simply because we could or markets were open. We turned down several bought deals earlier this year with people that just wanted us to load up on cash. And some companies say, oh, when the markets are open, take your money and load up on cash. And we said, no, we're going to raise money as we have a use of funds. And I think when we get an exploration permit, we will have a good use of funds, and we'll tap the market to, and if the market wants to finance that, we'll get more capital into the company. So I'd see us raising money mid-year.
That sounds like that's the way it probably should go there, Scott. And if you guys had to extend out and market conditions were pretty poor, if we have a liquidity event like we saw in 2020, you guys could possibly tighten up and carry yourselves definitely through Q3. So
yeah, correct. You can always go back. I mean, in a company of this size, you can always do that, that $5 million raise to sort of, keep the lights on and get through another, 6 or 8 months looking for another better point in the market. I don't think we're in that kind of capital market. I think there's going to be windows of excitement in precious metals, in half one here going into this year. And, we'll opportunistically raise capital when we've got a good use of funds. And I think we're going to show the market we got a great use of funds in core in 2021.
Well, let's talk about Imperial specifically, and then let's move on to Long Valley. What key items at Imperial are planned for 2021?
So primary objective in 2021 is to get Imperial into the formal permitting process with our regulator, which is the federal agency, the Bureau of Land Management, which reports up to the Department of Interior in the States, because our project in Imperial is 100% on federal land. Now there is a significant interaction with the county. So California law comes into play through the county, but we got to move into permitting through the BLM. So we're preparing a telephone book kind of application called a plan of operations, which takes our PEA mine plan, wraps all of the engineering around it. It'll also wrap environmental, cultural, and air, water, dust monitoring information so that the BLM can complete the environmental impact assessment on our mine plan. So we're currently undergoing environmental baseline and plan of operation preparation. We will be making that submission in the middle of 2021, right after we get our permit on the current plan of operation, which is the drilling one that we're currently processing with the BLM. So the back half of 2021, there will be multiple milestones on permitting Imperial to become a mine, submission of the plan of operations, then we'll strike an agreement with the BLM called a memorandum of understanding, which is how you're going to basically pay for the BLM's costs to process your EIS, followed by approval of that plan of operations late in 2021. And then on the exploration side, again, at Imperial, we expect to get the permit mid-year, and that'll allow us to turn on a drill. And we are permitting over 150 drill pads in that permit, and we would expect to turn a drill on, subject to having capital, in Q3 and not turn it off for almost 2 years, given the amount of opportunities we have. So we're going to start with greenfield exploration. We're going to move to near mine resource expansion, then into the technical work that support a feasibility study, and hopefully, subject again to getting the capital, we'd like to see that drill turn for 2 years straight and just continue to generate, excitement about the Imperial project.
Let's talk Long Valley in a minute, but with the permit and so forth, you should be able to turn a drill year round, obviously in that location, and you'll be doing infill drilling, exploration work on a couple different targets, from what I understand. Is that correct?
Yeah, correct. So at the Imperial project, one of the first things we did with one of Eric's first investments in 2019 was we staked 28 kilometers of trend that connects the Imperial deposit to the operating Mesquite mine, which is about 9 miles to the west, and going to the east to an old closed mine called Picacho. Now, these are all heap leach, open pit, at surface resources. There's a total of about 12 million ounces contained in those 3 deposits, and they were all discovered by outcrop. So Core went and staked all the ground in between, which is all under, we believe, thin sediment cover and is not been explored for that reason. Unlike in more mature gold camps, like in the Kalgoorlie in Australia, they've done lots of work exploring undercover to find those, tougher to find deposits. That work's never happened at Imperial and in Imperial County. So we've started that work. We've done geophysics to look under the soil. We've done a lot of prospecting and soil sampling in the arroyos, and you'll start seeing probably 2 or 3 more news releases in half one of 2020 as we start to crank out some of those exciting drill targets, and that's to make new discoveries. Like, these are whole new deposits not related to Imperial, between Mesquite, Imperial, and Picacho. And then the drill will eventually move closer over to Imperial, where you'll be doing step out drilling to try and increase the resource, as well as some infill, geotech, met, all the other technical work you need to do in the drilling in 2022.
What's the thought process with expanding the deposit both at Imperial and attaching these potential satellite deposits? One, to get the mine life up, and also to potentially improve the production profile at Imperial sufficiently to really attract that kind of senior mid-tier interest even further.
You got it, right? I mean, the PEA for Imperial produces 150,000 ounces of gold, but it's an 8-year mine life. So you could either spread that out at 100,000 ounces for a longer period, or you can make new discoveries and extend that mine life, which is exactly what happened at Mesquite. Mesquite started as a 2 million ounce deposit in 1983 and went into production in, I think it was 88, and 24 years later, something like that. Anyways, 25 years of operating later, it's a 9 million ounce series of deposits, and we think Imperial is likely to go the same way. So I think showing, even without drilling them out to resource stage, that blue sky upside will really cement the project at that mid-tier level, and I think creates one potential outcome for core shareholders, which would be a takeout at some point in this cycle.
Yeah, I would like to see it 12 plus years, and then also a profile that's around 200,000, maybe a little bit more, would really get it going. And the reason I bring that up is we look at it and we say, if there's enough potential for other million plus ounces through exploration, expansion of the Imperial deposit, potential satellite deposits at Mesquite East, these deposits all run along kind of a 20, 30 kilometer corridor that reach from Mesquite. And so what's wrong with a good haul road to these Mesquite facilities? That's my question.
Yeah, correct. I think there's definitely real synergies with Mesquite, given they have a large, we scoped the Imperial mine with the exact same class of equipment and shovel as they currently use at Mesquite for a lot of reasons, because there's people that know how to maintain and operate and plan mining just down the road. And there's a lot of reasons why there would be some really strong synergies with the Mesquite operation and Imperial. So we're going to pursue as best we can our own standalone plan and really we want to give ourselves a runway to get as many of these exploration holes as we can in before contemplating any kind of sale of the company, because we want to give our shareholders potential exposure to some of that exploration. So, it's always a balance between how long do you keep things going at core before you physically try and attract some kind of consolidation, because I think a consolidation with Mesquite at some point is logical.
Well, yeah, it's absolutely logical. And, Equinox has some time there and they have some potential. But the bottom line of it is your claims butt up right against Mesquite limits right now, from what I can tell.
They do, yep.
And the topography of the corridor is amenable to a haul road. Yeah.
Yep, flat as a pancake. You can see the heap leach pad from standing on the Imperial outcrop. So yes, it's all very, very doable. And I think Imperial County had, I think it was 5 operating heap leach gold mines, in the 1990s. And when with low gold price and the backfill law, really drove a lot of the companies out of California through the real, environmental push in California in the 90s and 2000s. And I think you're seeing the gold industry reemerge in California because the pricing is now such that you can adhere to these very stringent California laws and still make good returns, mining gold. So you're seeing the gold sector return to California, and hopefully Core is the vanguard of that.
Yeah, and California's going to need everything they can get at this point. Their economics are in shambles and people are leaving because they're tired of things that are happening in the state. So, they need all they can get. So it's time to revert back to what built the place. And that was built off of really mining and a lot of other industries that started out. And, the other point too is it's so much easier. And I'm not saying you guys can't do it. I think you can. And you're in a beautiful, one of the best, if not the best counties in California to do it, is permit a new mine. You're doing it right next to one that sits there. But in addition to that, I would just point out that it's much easier to expand a mine than it is to permit a new one. And so I know that Equinox pays attention. I'm sure you guys maybe even are talking, but it makes a lot of sense. And you guys are continuing to delineate a nice deposit and potentially some satellite deposits. So this Imperial project looks quite good.
Absolutely. We want to get as many of those exploration holes in there so we can create that blue sky upside and move forward. If Equinox wants to come along at some point and acquire it to combine with their Mesquite operation, that's a shareholder decision down the track. But I think we want to make sure we get our shareholders as many shots at that exploration as we can get ahead of that.
Certainly. And where you guys are today, it's still, obviously you guys aren't as cheap as you used to be, but it's still very viable. And you guys are certainly not expensive in my view.
Equinox is a $4 billion company now, with Premier maybe going up even more. At some point, we're going to be a rounding error to, 150,000 ounce mine at Mesquite is still not an insignificant operation, even for a 4 billion market cap Equinox. So I still think there's some strong logic why that asset's important to them. And at some point, if they want to come along and extend their mine life with a combination, hopefully that'll be to the benefit of core shareholders, and Equinox will then have a great long mine to base their continued growth on. So
yeah, this would be great to see the production profile increase, and this would obviously do the job, and makes a lot of sense to expand an existing operation, and most likely the easiest path of resistance with California to get there. Talk about Long Valley for a moment. Let's talk similar lines. Talk about the location first, and are there any existing mining operations in this county? I'm not as much familiar with Mono County, but maybe talk about the local area, maybe operating facilities that are still there now, and what key items are planned for 2021 at this project.
Yeah, great. I'll start on the location. So Mono County, California is tucked up right against the Nevada border. So you're effectively on the Walker Lane trend out of Nevada that crosses over into this part of California as it kind of comes, the angled part of California just south of Reno. So you're sort of due south of Reno, just about 9 miles across the Nevada border where this project is located. You're correct, Mono County does not currently have any industrial scale mining operations other than gravel. So sand and gravel in California, aggregates are permitted under the same regime. So the county does have some bureaucracy to manage the aggregate business, but does not have any hard rock gold or base metal mining operations currently. That said, the county has a rich history going back to the gold rush. There's a ton of gold mines, particularly to the northeast of our Long Valley project. There were several major gold camps that were part of the gold rush. There's all kinds of stuff up in the hills out of the several towns in the county. Like everywhere in California, you're always within reasonable distance of a federal road or a highway, and Long Valley is no different. You can get onto BLM roads from right over top of the project. You can drive there in a pickup truck, from a highway and from a major airport, within a few hours. So good location to have a project. The land we're on is U.S. Forest Service, so again, federal land. Currently, the deposit area of that land package is on a cattle lease. So there's a farmer that grazes his cattle on the ground. So this is not, even though it's Forest Service, there's no forest here. This is wide open, high kind of desert, low vegetation that's good enough to graze cattle, but only seasonally. The deposit is surrounded by a very large exploration area, which we claimed earlier this year. That gives us some good exploration upside. So our next steps is just that. This is a very typical PEA stage project. In 2021, we're currently permitting a 15,000 meter drill program to step out and try and show that there's more oxide gold. So the heap leachable material on strike. This is not new discovery. This is literally just step outs to the north and to the west of the current mineralization. Won't be doing dense enough drilling to declare more resources, but we want to show that that mineralization continues at surface and test the deposit for some deep sulfides. So very much exploration-y. Have not proposed a mine here. We're not moving into permitting. We have not done a lot of local community work yet because we're trying to see what this project can be first.
Yeah, sounds like cow pasture and jackrabbit hunting ground.
Yeah, that's very true. There's shotgun shell casings everywhere, and there's in the back half of this property, there's a place, these Californians go with their machine guns and heavy weaponry, and there's just like shell casings all over the place. And just give you some idea, this is rural California. It's about cattle and farming, and again, not as mining friendly as Imperial, because Imperial has operating mines in a much more recent industrial scale mine, but a good solid blue collar local community base that we'll see how they respond to a mining proposal as we move down the exploration path here.
Definitely looks like an area that is certainly amenable to potential mining operations given the history and the location. And, we know that, even with Equinox doing Castle Mountain, different county as well, they're in that process and have already started operations. So there's, you could say that there's maybe, 2 to 3 good counties left in California that are worth anything as far as mining goes.
Yeah, you got Kern with Soledad Mountain. You got San Bernardino, which is a huge county with some great opportunities, where Castle Mountain is. Imperial County is a good one. We'll see how we go in Mono County here, but you certainly want to be on the right side of Sierra Nevada, and well away from any kind of visual impacts. And I think that's the sort of key recipe for success.
Right. We'll talk about the potential here to expand the deposit. Just discuss that for a moment. I know the PEA has already indicated, a little bit of an early thought process behind mine life and also the production profile, but along the same lines as Imperial, Scott. But what do you see there as potentially to improve that and get those numbers up?
Yeah. So, the first thing we did on the project was, as you should, the data was all quite old. So we relogged all the core. Did a lot of field work, mapping, and this deposit is a very thin veneer of gold above an intact epithermal gold system, and it's probably actually still forming. You're in a fairly young geologically anyways, crater. You're on the sort of middle of a crater, and you've seen these hydrothermal fluids come up that's created this gold mineralization in the sort of center of this crater and some faulting. You've got actually about 10 miles to the west of this project, you've got a geothermal energy plant, and it just shows that this is probably still an active epithermal system. So the gold is very thin. The oxide gold we're talking about here is all within 90 meters of surface. That's great because you don't have to dig deep pits, so your strip ratio is low, it's easy to backfill, and it's easy to meet, again, those very high reclamation standards in California because of the shallow nature of the mineralization. Our geophysics and fieldwork showed that there's some, undrilled, very, near resource, basically step out targets to the west and to the north of the known mineralization, just following sort of the fault structures. And that makes a lot of sense because, Royal Gold, who originally drilled this project in the 90s, basically just stopped the project mid-resource development when the gold price started going down in the late 90s. And when the backfill law came in the 2000s and gold was $250 an ounce, well, they also went on to become a royalty company, but they sold the project and it sat dormant in a junior. So we've kind of just stepped into their shoes and are basically moving back into resource development. So some very obvious targets to try and, our objective would be to double the oxides. Of the 1.7 million ounces in the project, about 1 million is pure oxide, about 200,000 ounces of transition, and then some sulfides. And really only the transition and oxides matter for heap leach mining. So we'd like to double the oxides. I don't think you're going to get to a 200,000 ounce project here. It's just not that kind of deposit given its, thin, low grade heap leach. But you could probably have a good 15-year, 100,000 ounce project that would be a nice, simple heap leach. And then we'd see how the greater exploration goes. We've got 16,000 acres of additional land to explore that's unexplored, to make some more discoveries. Again, this pod nature of these deposits, I suspect there's some more gold mineralization in this old caldera, and try and extend that after you've got a production, but probably a slightly lower production amount like than Imperial, but I think a great, simple mid-tier gold project.
Scott, do you see that with both Imperial and Long Valley, and obviously the timelines being a little bit different here, staying obviously all this in core mining, it sounds like there's no intent to separate these two assets, but do you see that Imperial could finance an operation at Long Valley?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. The capital intensity of both of these projects is very low. I think the capital was less than 150 million bucks. Sorry, 161 million bucks pre-production capex at Long Valley. That's easily financeable with cash flow you'd see from a 150,000 ounce gold mine at Imperial. So we do see it as a pipeline of projects. If core makes it through the cycle without being taken out and is heading towards production at Imperial, you'd see this as the next mine going into production. And when you stack those two up, you've got a good 250,000 ounce production base for the company to continue to grow at that point and be a U.S. Gold producer. Now, as we talked about earlier, do we ever get there? That'll be a question for M&A down the track. But these two projects dovetail well into building up a production profile for a gold company.
Well, I think at this point, this question is really a question of exploration. What else can you demonstrate? And that, I think if that's done correctly, that's probably the end of the story. And I guess coupling with that too, with the relationships with Mono County and also with Imperial County, what do you think are the biggest challenges here, Scott? And don't say COVID, we've heard that before. But what are the biggest challenges, getting these projects into certainly Imperial into production? What do you see further to really de-risk both of these projects? What do you see kind of as the big challenge that's in your head here?
Yeah, without a doubt, it is getting local support, right? Because at Imperial, number one is absolutely permitting. We've got, let's call it $500 million Canadian in value to unlock by showing that, Imperial is permittable in this location in California, to ensure that you can fend off the inevitable, NGO challenges that come to every mining project and quite frankly, every parking lot, solar farm, wind farm, every use of land in California or the United States in general will face some kind of opposition from some kind of NGO or community group or something. The way you counter that is by having strong local support. The people that live near and the stakeholders around this project have to want it in vast majority, and we need to generate, and we call it the coalition of support. We need to generate a strong coalition of support in Imperial County. I think we're well down the path to do that. We've spent most of our effort over the last 12 months, because the engineering of this project is so simple. Most of our effort and most of our team hired down there is about community and government relations. We've had multiple levels of political politicians out to the project. We've been educating both the local communities and stakeholders and everybody we can in Imperial County about this project. And we've seen some good, strong support. And we got to keep fostering that support so that, that support, politicians can stand up and say, my constituency overall wants this project. And that is what the political will is, what gets you through the permitting process in the United States. So building political will in Imperial County, the most important thing for Imperial Gold. At Long Valley, biggest risk is exploration. I think to put Long Valley on kind of the list of mid-tier US gold projects, I thought your question was very germane in that, how can you get it to a good mid-tier level where you've got well over 100,000 ounces of production for a reasonable amount of time? It's all about the drill bit. So at Long Valley, the big risk is, are we going to be successful finding any more oxide mineralization? Because I don't think you're going to bother permitting a mine in California that doesn't have enough gold mine life and scale to bother going through that rigorous process.
What do you see really as, looking at the potential suitors out there? These projects, they're on the cusp of certainly gathering some more attention based on how you guys go with exploration here and further delineation of existing deposits. But what do you see as kind of a mid-tier profile that you think that really would like this? Or do you really see that these projects could become something that a major would start to look at? What's your thoughts on that?
Absolute, Frank. I don't see these types of deposits generating enough gold or scale that you're going to see interest from, Newmont, Barrick, or the what people describe as the majors. These are solid mid-tier projects. They're going to be of interest to the Heclas, Coeurs, Agnicos, all the other sort of array of gold companies in the United States and Canada, and quite frankly, even the South Americans, which are, diversifying, over the rest of North America. The project's going to fit very well in that camp. Even Australians, I think, are starting, the Australians are pretty big in their britches and running out of gold in Australia, are pushing, they've certainly pushed into Canada, certainly kicking some tires at some of the Nevada guys. And Nevada's pretty picked over and pretty expensive. So I think we're gonna look pretty attractive as we go forward here with a, good solid 150,000 ouncer at Imperial, with hopefully a longer mine life with the drill bit, and a second project in the pipeline that just gives a bit of that blue sky. I think we're gonna be very attractive to mid-tier gold miners as we de-risk.
Well, Scott, for potential investors who are on the sidelines listening, market cap sitting around 180 million Canadian here, what would you say to them at this stage and at current price levels?
I think there's lots of value to create inside core. We've got our cheapest peer is almost 300 million bucks in Integra Gold. The rest of the peer group are in the 300 to 500 million market cap range, and it's our job in management and the board to get Core's valuation there. That's what I expect in Core. For near-term ownership, you're also going to, I think, getting those Karus shares and access to the rights offering we plan to finance Karus is a really exciting opportunity as well. And I think you're going to end up, by owning Core today, it's kind of a 2-for-1. I think you're going to have two great companies in 2021 on their own path and can generate a lot more value like we did in 2020.
That sounds great, and I would encourage folks to take a look at that potential offering there and how they can get shares via Core as well. And Scott, best way for investors to reach out to the company?
Just reach out to us. Go to our website, coremining.com. Send us an email, give us a phone call. We love talking to shareholders. We got a nice tight register, and give us a call.
Well, Scott, thanks for coming back on the show. Keep up the good work over there at Core, and hoping to speak again.
Great. Hey, thank you very much for having me. All the best in 2021.